This episode, I sat and had a conversation with Hildegund Amanshauser. Hildegund is a very successful art historian. She's a writer, she's a curator, she's worked around the globe in the art scene, and she's highly respected. She is the former director of the Summer Academy for Fine Arts, where they actually teach the art in the fortress for a section of that academy. She is the former director of the Salzburg Kunstverein. I really appreciated her inviting me to have the conversation and record a podcast, and I hope that you guys enjoy the conversation too. So Hildegund Amanshauser, thank you very much for inviting me to your place today. I'm privileged to be here. You are the former director of the Salzburger Kunstverein, as well as the former professor of art history at the Münster Art Academy, the former director of the International Summer Academy for Fine Arts. You are an art historian, a curator, a lecturer, an author, and you've got a blog and a website. Thank you very much for doing this podcast with me again. As I said, it's a privilege to be here. I hope I got all of that right. And I did mention to you before, when I arrived, one of the first questions that I wanted to talk to you about was your position at the Salzburger Kunstverein, because as I understand, it was not easy sometimes to be a woman in a position in 1992 as a director. You were the first director of the Salzburger Kunstverein and the first female, obviously. So my first question is, how was it to be sort of leading the idea of being a female in that position, whether it is the Salzburger Kunstverein or just a high up position as that is?
I came to Salzburg from Vienna, from the Vienna secession, where I was curator and general secretary, and I felt at the time that it would have been difficult in Vienna to become a director of an institution comparable with the Salzburger Kunstverein, and I felt that it was easier to do it kind of in the province, as we said in Vienna, but I never felt that it was difficult as a woman. I was not so aware of myself being a woman in the sense of this would have made a difference.
Sure.
What was difficult for the board and the members of the Kunstverein was that there was someone who was now responsible for the program. Until then, the board was responsible for the program, the exhibition program, and whatever it was. And then I came along, and of course I had to present my program to the board once a year. But they were not used that someone is coming and making his or her own program in the sense of having his own ideas.
I see. So it was not only it was almost the fact that there was a director in general that was saying, let's do this for the year. This is the program.
Yeah.
It doesn't really necessarily matter that it was a female or a male from your perspective.
It was, from my perspective, it was not the case. Yeah.
And as I said to you, I spoke to your colleague or ex-colleague or friend, Susanne, who still works there, who's a fantastic lady. And she said that, she really looks up to you, and she thought that you had, in a way, broken through what might be the status quo or the normal when it comes to leadership and directing such a firm. And do you feel like that you were, a leader in that sense to people like her and your colleagues back then?
What I experienced often in my career, was that I came to an institution and I had to set up a new structure for this institution.
Okay.
And this was in a way at the secession as well, because when I came, I mean, there was one secretary and the board. And then it was me being responsible for the press work, for the publications, together with the president at the time, who was Edelberg Kulp. But then in Salzburg again, I mean, it was a very amateurish institution, and I had to set up everything, yeah. And then there came more and more people who worked with me, and and I also had to learn how to be responsible for personnel, for example.
Okay.
This is, I mean, when you are the boss, it's two main issues. It's the personnel and the budget. Besides, of course, what you think is the main issue is the program.
I see.
But management-wise, it's the personnel and the budget.
Yeah. And as you said, one of the main tasks or your main duty would, at a position like this, in the same position I just spoke with Seamus Keeley, the previous or the current director, is to acquire talent, to find potential artists, bring them to Salzburg, display their artwork or their film, and kind of give them a window open, show their art to the world in a way. And my question is, do you have any what is your most memorable artwork that you've ever brought to Salzburg?
Oh God.
Or artist?
I think I have to answer it a little bit similar as Seamus did it. I mean, as a curator, it's always the thing you do right now, which is the most memorable, most important, most exciting thing. So, and also, you feel like equidistant in a way to most of the people you work with, although you are befriended with some and not so much befriended with the others. Yeah. But this is very difficult because everything, I mean, I can tell you what I think is one of the most interesting projects I did for Salzburg.
Okay.
Yeah. But this would be 100 Days No Exhibition, which was a project in the year 2000, and which was planned always for the beginning of the year 2000, because after some years at the Kunstverein, I had the impression we would have everybody in the Kunstverein and myself also would have to rethink the institution. And so I thought we are going to close for 3 months. But in the end, in the beginning, I only wanted to close. But this was not a very good idea in terms of the people for whom I work and from whom I got the money. And it was then a coincidence that at the time when we started the project, we had this new government, which was right-wing government. And so everybody thought this is a great project against the government.
I see.
But it was planned already for a longer time. And then in the end, we ended up having, 100 guests or even more. During that time, we had discussions and artists in residence and workshops and you name it, but no exhibition.
Okay, I see. And then an additional question on top of that would be, if you've worked, you told me previously or just before that you've traveled and worked in many countries and many places around the world. What is, from your point of view, maybe the most memorable place that you've gone to a different country for work-related things, whether it's memorable because of the culture in the country or the people or the architecture? Do you have any thoughts from your perspective of artwork in different cultures, different countries?
Yeah, it would be in a way the same answer. I mean, there were so many memorable artworks and artists and people I met in the art scene and outside, of course. But I mean, my recent travels in the last year were Pakistan, Lahore, Dhaka, Bangladesh, Beirut, which is very close to Europe, of course. What else? And Democratic Republic of Congo, Lubumbashi. Lubumbashi was the most different city, different from whatever else I experienced in my working life.
Okay.
That's true. But I cannot say more memorable.
Yeah. What was the Democratic Republic of Congo like?
The Democratic Republic of Congo is not the tourist country, which also the other countries are no tourist countries. Beirut used to be, and it's a dysfunctional state. I think one can say this, and the people there also say it.
Yeah.
And Lubumbashi is the southeast region of the Republic of Congo, which is a huge country in the center of Africa. And there is the region where all these, I don't know how to call it in English. In German, we say seldom earths. It's an area where they extract
valuable
earths or
earth materials. Yeah. Okay.
Minerals.
I see. Yeah.
Which are very important for all computers and mobile phones and so on.
Okay.
And the city doesn't function like other cities I have experienced. But there was an opening of a biennial, which an artist did, Sami Baloshi, who also taught at the Summer Academy.
Okay.
So this was the connection.
I see. So you went there,
because this was the occasion, an occasion for me to go there and get an impression how this part of the world functions, if you want to.
Yeah, I see.
Where people with whom I work come from.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting exhibition, but it was difficult to get around and things like that. As you know, you also traveled to countries where it was difficult to get around.
Yeah, and a little bit dangerous probably too, eh?
I didn't feel
it.
No,
okay.
but I don't know. Perhaps I don't feel the danger, or you are not in danger when you are a woman who is not young enough to be in danger. I don't know.
Maybe. One thing that I'm fascinated about is your experience working in the, like you just mentioned, the Summer Academy for Fine Arts. And Seamus told me, as well as some of the research I did, that this actually has there's a place in the castle, in the fortress, where you teach art there. So that's fascinating for me, especially as I mentioned before, coming from New Zealand, we don't have fortresses in New Zealand. We don't have this kind of architecture. What is it like to operate an art academy with a place in the fortress? Is that quite fantastic? Does that attract attention from around the world, or?
Perhaps I can begin with the beginning.
Yeah?
Sure. This school, which is called Salzburg International Summer Academy now, was founded by an Austrian painter who was called Oskar Kokoschka. And it was founded after the Second World War. He had a gallerist in Salzburg who was called Friedrich Welz, and Welz wanted him to come to Salzburg and live here, but Kokoschka wanted to found a new art academy, and from the very beginning he wanted to found a global institution, or as it was called at the time, international institution. International meant Western world at the time.
Yeah.
It was the time of the Cold War, and in 1953 he founded this. It was the first year of the academy. He called it School of Vision. And he wanted it to have on the fortress. He said, I want to attract people from all over the world. I want to work with amateurs and professionals as students, and I wanted to be in the fortress. Welz wanted him to take a mill which was owned by his brother or things like that. But he always said, I want to be on the top of the city. He painted a cityscape from above there, and this was where he wanted to go. I mean, it's complicating to have a contemporary art academy up there because it's complicated to get there, to bring all the material up there, and it's also kind of ridiculous. I mean, the installation class, they go to the, how do you call this, scrapyard? No. Scrapyard?
Scrapyard would be like the trash.
Yeah. They go to the scrapyard and then they bring all the trash up. And then they make the installations and then we bring it back to the scrapyard. Actually. And so, but of course, for many people coming from abroad, and it's still an academy where people come from 50 countries, and so for them, it's an attraction. For us, working there, it's also nice, of course, but it's also
annoying sometimes.
I mean, it's complicated with the internet, and
And also, I can imagine in winter would be.
No, we are not. I mean, not we, but
running in summer.
The offices are down in the city.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be cold up there.
Yeah. And also, because I did look a bit into this Oskar Kukoschka guy.
Yeah.
The painter, the Austrian painter, he also, there's a crazy story where he apparently, I think he cheated on his wife. She left him, and then he made a sculpture, a puppet, of which he kept with him in order to sort of replace his wife.
It was Alma Mahler-Werfel.
Okay.
He had a love affair with her, but she was at the time, I don't remember, still with Mahler or already with Werfel, but perhaps for some time he was the main lover, but he was very disappointed. Excuse me, when she left him. And then he burned this life-size puppet in Prague as a ritual of getting rid of her or whatever.
I see.
He was, he was an expressionist in his early years.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he also wrote a theater piece called Murderer, Hope of the Women. So he was he was an expressionist and but then he became a very kind of conservative painter, and he was totally against abstraction, which was also interesting because in the Cold War, the US was standing for abstract painting, the New York School and so on, and it was more the Eastern countries who were into figurative painting, but he was friends with the communist. He was never a communist, and he was against communism, but he was into figurative painting and hated abstract painting.
Okay. I've got a bit of a different question as well. So in 2021, so this year recently, I think it was in May, there was an Italian artist who auctioned off an invisible sculpture for $18,000. I don't know if you've heard about that. So he claimed that the sculpture essentially was in the power of the art, so in the eye of the beholder to decide what the sculpture is, essentially. I think that's how he sold it.
But who is the artist?
I don't know, sorry. No, it was Salvador Agaru. Salvador Garu. It is a work that asks you to activate the power of imagination, was his quote. And what I wanted to ask you was, for a lot of people that sounds ridiculous. How can you sell an invisible sculpture for €18,000? Do you agree with that? Do you think that this is nonsense, or do you think that there's something there?
I don't know enough about it, so I can't tell you what I personally think about it. But there is, for example, a German performance artist who is called Tino Segal. He also exhibited at the Biennial in Venice for in the German pavilion a few years ago in a group show, and he sells his work without any paper, but it's a specific work, and the owner of the work has the right to perform this work, but there is no paper at all. And so, I mean, there are many artworks like this during the last years. I mean, you can say it started with Duchamp when he bought his bottle dryer in the department store in Paris and put it on a pedestal and said, this is an artwork, which is called now Objet Trouvé. So, I mean, art is what the artist thinks is an artwork and what the community also believes that it is an artwork. But of course, it's up to you or to anybody else to say, for me, this is not art, but
if it sells for $18,000, then somebody thought it was art, so therefore they enjoyed it enough to purchase it.
Probably, yes. I'm sorry, I didn't hear about it.
No.
At the time, it was so much about NFT.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody talked about this, and I went a little bit into that. So I didn't recognize this one.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your work in the suburb of Liehen in Salzburg. I did get your book. I couldn't unfortunately read most of it because it was in German, but it's called Salzburg Liehen öffentlicher Raum. Can you explain a little bit what you were trying to accomplish? So first of all, just to explain for people listening, Liehen in Salzburg has a reputation of not being the best place to live. But you've done a bit of work in this region, and I believe it was to sort of make this place sound a little bit more accommodating, a little bit more pleasant. Is that right? What were you accomplishing with your book that you published?
It was a catalog for a project which was called Öffentlicher Raum, Public Space. And it was a project in public space which in 1997 was a kind of theory project with lectures and discussions. And then, and it was a joint project, not only by the Salzburger Kunstverein, but also by other institutions in Salzburg, like this Salzburg Summer Academy or the Fotohof and others. I don't remember.
Okay.
And it was about the question, what is public space and what could art do within public space? It was a time when community projects started to be interesting, for example, and where many people thought about what is the city, what determines the city, and how could people live better in cities. And this is, and then we thought it doesn't make any sense to do it in the touristic center, because in the touristic center there are completely different problems. We did with the Salzburger Kunstverein and partners in Estonia and the Netherlands another project in public space in 2005, and this was 1997 and 98, and so. And then we found Liehen. We thought it is an interesting place, which is more like a normal city. I mean, I didn't think it was dangerous. I don't think there's any dangerous place in Salzburg. Yes, it has, and still it had at the time, and still has a traffic problem, which is even more, even heavier now than it used to be at the time. And there was a very interesting project by Luc Deleu, who wanted to close the Ignaz-Harrer-Straße, which is the main street, and which is really kind of, which has a traffic problem. And now it's like a downtown street, It's with... it's not nice anymore. It was better at the time, but now it's really ugly in a way. And he wanted to close the whole traffic during 2 hours at lunchtime.
Okay.
But the politicians didn't allow it. So
No.
in the end, that we had only signs with the suggestions, but the shop owners, they wanted it.
Okay, cool. Interesting. And this is kind of an open question, I guess, but you've worked with many people throughout your lifetime. You've worked with people from different cultures and countries too. And again, I'm sorry that this is not specific enough, but do you have any specific memorable stories? Anyone that's left a mark on your life, throughout your life, that you think of today, or you think of often, and think maybe even look up to them, or that have changed the way that you see the world?
I'm not so good in this storytelling, I presume. I don't know. I mean, into my mind comes my one of my first bosses, Edelberg Köp, who was the president at the time at the secession.
Okay.
He really taught me what is curating, what is writing, he also was at the time a professor at the Art Academy, and he was this kind of supporting person, yeah. And I really learned a lot about the art, I found with his help my way of being a curator, being a writer, making a program for an institution, thinking about mediation and things like that. And because you have to imagine, I studied art history a long time ago, and there were no curating courses or whatever. Yeah, and even it was not usual that you learned something about contemporary art. This art history was dead artists. So this is what I mean. My generation had to educate themselves in a way. From scratch. We had to learn everything. Management and programming and discourse and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. In terms of artists whom I met, there were so many very interesting artists. You would have to be more precise to kind of get my memory going.
Yeah. No, I understand that, and it's unfortunate because of my lack of art knowledge that I suffer. That's where I suffer with my questions here.
I mean, I think what is important to know with people like myself is that it's not only me who does the work, but I used to work for institutions. And so there is always a dialogue between the institution, how also you can change an institution, but you have to think on the level of the institution. So when it was not only my networks with which I brought people to Salzburg, not in the Salzburger Kunstverein and not in the Salzburg International Summer Academy. It was my networks, yes, and my credibility, but it was always also the credibility of the institution. And I always had to think on both levels, the institution and myself, which was interesting for me. And it was always interesting for me to also redefine an institution, rethink an institution.
Yeah.
This was how I used to work.
Okay. Well, I don't actually have any more further questions, but I would love to ask you if you had anything that you would like to say or any questions that you would like to ask me.
Yeah. Yeah, what is the purpose of your podcast?
This is a tricky question. I get asked this more and more often.
Yeah.
The more podcasts I do. That's hard for me to answer right now. I wish that I could give you a straightforward answer with perfect, this is the vision of what I'm doing. And the closest thing that I can say is that trying to make the world a better place by building educational, points of through conversation. So if I can have a conversation with somebody, like I told you before, from Iraq, and understand their story and their perspective on life, that will help me, but it'll also help people that listen. After I chatted with this guy that I told you that, left his home country because his family were told to leave, I now understand more about refugees in this country. And I think that education is important, because otherwise racism is going to exist. If people aren't educated on why a refugee is here, especially in Salzburg, some people are very racist with that, then it's not fair for them. They're not here because they chose to. They're here because they fear for their life. And that happens on a wide range of spectrums. It could be in a positive way. Sitting and talking to you, you're a very successful person and you've accomplished a lot. And I think that there's a lot that people can learn maybe from you, especially me. Sitting here, I'm privileged to chat with you. So think through conversation. My goal is to make the world a bit of a better place. That's the end goal, or I guess if you could say, vision of what I'm doing here.
It's a very big vision, isn't it?
It is a big vision, but everything starts with a small space, small step.
Because you saw that I started a blog, I don't know, 2 months ago or so, with a friend of mine who is art historian as well, and we just want to have fun and do what we like to do. So it's very much below your effort in a way.
Yeah, but also in a certain beautiful extent, like I love doing this. And this is where I feel the most alive in a way. I love to meet people and talk. I know I'm a little bit more extroverted, but it's like the combination of, I actually enjoy doing this as well. So that's something that's important for me. I wouldn't do this I would do this for myself. If I had no microphones here, I'd still want to have this conversation, because I have lots of value in it. So it helps me with that, yeah.
And you can also approach people whom it would be more difficult to approach.
Yeah.
Without any reason, kind of.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Once again, I really appreciate the invite. I appreciate the tea. And goodbye, everybody.